as I talk. But I want to start, please, by thanking you. How wonderful to be invited to present my work on therapeutic storytelling, story medicine, stories that can help, sometimes just a little, sometimes a lot, stories that can soothe, stories that can inspire, motivate, build resilience, sometimes even stories that can heal situations. And I think that this is very much such an important approach in education and parenting work for our future, an important new narrative, we could say, for our future, crafting stories to address challenging situations and challenging behaviors. And I want to start by honoring Indigenous cultures all around the world. And I'm going to read to you something out of my new book that's actually winging its way towards me at the moment. So in some ways, this is the official launch of this. And I'll just show you the cover. And as you're looking at that, I'm going to read. This is out of my introduction. Out of deep respect for Indigenous cultures worldwide, it is important here to honour the magnificence of their oral history. Before books, before writing, for thousands of years, many thousands of years, oral storytelling was integral to our humanity. Ben Okri, a Nigerian poet and novelist, eloquently states, "The universe began as a story. We are part human, part stories." In many Indigenous cultures, story embraced and still embraces everything, all life, connectedness, nature, and community. The stories and the storytellers stitched life and purpose and earth and sky together, mostly using images and motifs from the natural world, animals, birds, trees, mountains, clouds, stars, moon, and sun. In times of grief and loss, strength would be drawn from the stars, solace gained from sitting by a river, pain eased by walking through a forest. Stories were created that wove nature threads into healing journeys, and to this day continue to weave their healing work. The world has so much to learn from this wisdom. I think with Indigenous cultures for thousands of years, there was a sacred aspect, almost it was elated to a higher level, the imagination and story work. And if you research through religions all around the world, you will find that they too, if they wanted to share pearls of wisdom, it wasn't done through giving lectures, it wasn't done by sharing information, it was mostly done through stories. And there is a wise understanding there. Now, I'm coming now to my personal journey. How did I enter this story work? Sometimes people ask me, because I've written so many stories, was it something that I was just born with? Was it a natural talent? And very much not. It was very much the opposite for me. For the first 30 or more years of my life, I was a math student. I did honours mathematics at school, and I had very little interest in writing. In fact, creative writing at school was my least favourite subject. And this connection to story, especially therapeutic stories, stories that can really help to make a shift in attitude, behaviour, do some helping work. This interest arose out of a pure accident because, well, first of all, just to put you in the picture, I, many years ago, was a mother of 3 little boys. And at this point in their life, they ages 7, 6, and 4. And common sense just spoke to me. I should put them to bed with stories, certainly not let them fall asleep in front of the television screen. So I would gather stories in the libraries. And just out of this experience, I observed stories would make a difference in the attitude. A story about a little helping elf that did jobs in the house caused one of my boys to suddenly start being such a helper in the home. Another story that was rather a nonsense story about a bear that blew bubbles helped my youngest stop screaming during hair washing time and listen and absorb himself in the process of having his hair washed. I kept observing this. I think the scientist in me, I think it was a good combination, because not only did I observe, but I also used to document. I was a teacher. I would observe the children may have been whinging, complaining a lot. I'd create a story, whinging whale, and then keep notes. Did I observe this making a difference? A child may have been aggressive and hurtful. A story, cranky crab. Did this make a difference? Because all therapeutic work, as far as I understand it, therapeutic stories, they're not just stories on their own. They consist of what I could call a backstory. And then you've got the story. And then you've got, you could say, the after story. Hope you can see that. I won't be using the whiteboard very often, but it is handy to put that up there. So more and more, I built up a collection of documented stories. Now, I also, the more I wrote stories, I started to experience that there was quite, it's hard to know what to call it. Sometimes I do refer to it as a framework, but there were ingredients that were part of writing therapeutic stories. Metaphor, I'm just going, oh, the board's gone. Hang on a minute. Metaphor, M for metaphor, journey, and resolution. Metaphor, journey, resolution. For some reason, my pen isn't working. Isn't that just wonderful, seeing as we're recording this? So you're going to have to imagine this. M for metaphor, J for journey, R for resolution. And clarifying a resolution, trying to work out what is out of balance in the situation that you're writing for, and what is the preferred or most desirable balance. And then finding metaphors and building with those metaphors. I like to think they dance together to create the journey to reach a resolution. That's a very simplistic model. And something I probably should have said very early on is that there's absolutely no recipes here. It's not like a cooking class when one is teaching how to write therapeutic stories. Every therapeutic story is different. But this has certainly been an important part, this metaphor, journey, and resolution. Maybe the board's dried by now. Resolution. Fortunately, I have some PowerPoint slides for the other things I wanted to put on the board. Now, at this point in time, I want to introduce you to a woman called Margot Sunderland. She has this little book and many other books using storytelling as a therapeutic tool with children. Margot Sunderland is head of education and training for child mental health in London. In other words, she's in a very important position. And she argues in her books for the importance of children being spoken to through story language. Of course, not all the time. If there's a child's about to touch a hot tap, you're not going to take time to get creative with making up a story to encourage them to not turn that very hot water on. There's certainly times in children's life where they need some direct instructions. But she feels that more and more today, children are being fed too much information, too much left brain, logical, rational, reasoning stuff. And she says that all of these literal, rational approaches, they're like dead little words or dead little sentences for children. And that it is a much more natural thing for children to hear in picture language and story language. And I would stretch that. I think it is not just for children, but for all ages. We can be spoken to deeply through metaphor and picture. Now, to jump into now some practical examples, because I find this is the best way to share this with you. And I'm going to share with you something that happened very early on in my story writing career. I just need to stop and get a drink. And it's a very good example of the difference of speaking to a child in story language or speaking in rational, literal language. This is a situation that happened at my school many years ago. Normal morning, children are arriving, and this little boy, Matthew, 4 years old, comes running in to the room. And usually he was a quiet little, cooperative little child, very easygoing. And he ran into that room like a wind, whirled around, kicked out at children, knocked things off the shelves. And I could see straight away he was not his normal self. Something must have happened. And I said to his mother as she arrived, coming in afterwards to bring his bag into his locker, Meryl, what has been going on? And she said, well, we're all very shook up, as you can see. In the middle of the night last night, a fire started in our house. And the fire, fortunately, my husband and I and our little boy, we could get outside. We stood in the garden waiting for the fire engine to come and watched most of the house burn to the ground, including Matthew's bedroom and playroom. And then the mother said something very interesting. She said, I've tried to explain to him. I thought he would be old enough to understand. We have insurance. We have we just have to do the paperwork, and then we will get money and we'll be able to rebuild the house. But he doesn't seem to understand. And I remember thinking to myself, this little boy needs some story language. And even though I'm not that accustomed to being able to make up a story quickly, at rest time that day, a story quickly came into being. It was quite rough, but at goodbye time, just 5 minutes before, I gathered the children and I shared this story. I'll give you a summary because it's a very good example of story language and metaphor. It's about a mother rabbit, lived in a hole in the ground with her baby rabbits. The baby rabbits would come out of the hole each day, and all around was green, long green grass, and they would jump and play. That was their beautiful playground. Then they would go back down and they would sleep. And one day, while they were sleeping, the mother had to go off to look for some food, and she left them sleeping. And while she was away, a little bushfire blew up with the wind and crossed that field and burnt all the green grass to the ground. The mother rabbit came back to the edge. She had to wait till the ground cooled down, and then she hopped across the burnt, blackened earth. Were her babies all right, she wondered. She peered down into the hole, and yes, they were still fast asleep. And Mother Rabbit climbed down into the hole and continued to sleep with them. And when they woke up, they peered up over the top, and already they could see tiny little green shoots growing. And they watched and they waited. They waited and they watched. And the green grass grew and grew and grew and grew until, once again, it was long and lush as before, and the bunny rabbits had somewhere to run and jump and play. Now, there were two reactions from Matthew for this story. The first one was that he leaned forward and said, "Oh, Susan, can we hear that story again tomorrow? And the next day, and the next day?" And then, when his mother arrived, I watched him, and he ran towards her, and he called out, "Mummy, everything's going to be all right." I'll still never forget how he spoke to her, quite calmly. Everything's going to be all right. It's a wonderful example of sharing a truth through this story language. And if you look back at what I have put up here, and very simply, the metaphors. The green grass, obvious, a metaphor for his playroom and bedroom that had burnt to the ground. The rabbits, a metaphor for him and his family. I chose the rabbits because that was Matthew's favorite animal in our collection of animals we had in our garden to care for. And then the resolution. The playground is burnt, it grows back. The journey is really the sequence of events that leads from one to the other. We're going to have quite a bit of play with making story journeys later in this talk, in this workshop. So my life continued, and I then got work with a local government body, our local council, and I had funding from the Commonwealth government, and my role was to help consult parents with children with challenging behaviour and help to build bridges between home and school and come up with strategies for the children. And of course, because I was exploring more and more story work, I even told them this in the interview, I will be bringing a lot of stories to this work. And it gave me a chance to develop this more and more, and also develop trainings, because the teachers and parents were saying, well, we want to learn how to write these stories ourselves. And years went on, and I'm wanting to fit in a few more examples for you so that you've got an idea of different kinds of stories for different ages. The next one happened when, and it's about 8 years ago now, and I visited Croatia. I was running seminars in Zagreb. And a mother came to the seminar. She was desperate to have help with a situation with her 17-year-old teenager, who sadly had, by this stage, lost the use of her legs. She had a disease she had inherited from her grandmother, and she could no longer use her limbs, her leg limbs. The parents had bought a wheelchair for this girl, but she was absolutely refusing the use of the wheelchair. It's ugly. All she wanted to do was stay in her room on her bed. She was angry, depressed. You can understand how difficult that must have been for her. Well, the mother crafted a little story. It was only short. The story was about a black stone necklace. A black stone necklace that a girl had inherited from her grandmother, and she wore it with pride. For many years, the necklace went everywhere she did. But after some time, the necklace began to grow heavy, and the girl might be ice skating, and the heavy stone would pull her to the ground. She'd be trying to climb stairs, and the heavy stone would pull her down. And one day, the big stone in the center of the necklace seemed to be so heavy that it pulled her to the ground and she couldn't get up again. And in this process, the stone cracked open and a beautiful amethyst light shone out. And as it shone, it seemed to say, I can shine a light forward. That was the story. And the mother also had a little amethyst ring that she had been meaning to give to her daughter. And that evening she went home and she gave the teenager a typed copy of the story and the little ring. And the next morning, the teenager called her parents to her room and said, with the help of the story and the ring, I'm ready to use the wheelchair. Now, this story continues. This is what I meant when I said the backstory, the story, and the after story. This story continues. Several weeks later, this teenager wrote me an email to thank me for coming to Croatia so her mother could write the story. But then 6 years later, when I was once again in Zagreb running seminars, this teenager, now 23 years old, came to visit me. I'm going to show you a photo of her. She came to visit me with a bunch of flowers and there she is, a bunch of flowers on her lap to say thank you and also to tell me that she was now at university and she was working as an advocate for disability services. And she had helped the university put in ramps up to the roofs. She had helped the university to install a lift in the main lecture room. And she was so proud of the work she was doing. And this is a wonderful example of story medicine, a wonderful example. And interesting with the teenager, even though she knew the mother had written the story, she understood intellectually, but the metaphor overrode all of that. The metaphor spoke to her heart. And the metaphor is such a key ingredient in therapeutic story making. The last main example I want to share with you is one that I'm going to use to, after I've shared the backstory and the story itself, I'm going to show you the process that the group of psychologists went through to write such a story, because it was very, very difficult for them, but they finally crafted something that did wonderful work. Now, this was in Bulgaria, in Eastern Europe, and a very sad situation. A little 5-year-old girl had a month before hand lost her father. In the middle of the night, the father had died very suddenly of a brain tumor. And from that time, the little girl was so frightened about falling asleep, and she was very frightened about her mother falling asleep. And you could understand why she would have these feelings. She developed behaviors in the evening to keep herself awake. She would scratch herself. She would pinch herself. She would scream loudly. She would run round and round, anything. And sometimes she would just eventually fall asleep. Tiredness would pull her down, and she would fall asleep just on the floor. Wake up again a few hours later. By then, her mother may have been asleep. She would run in to the mother. Wake up, we can't sleep, Mummy, we can't sleep. And this had gone on for a month. And just a few days before I arrived in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, the mother had come to visit the psychologist to speak to her what could be done. Already it was difficult enough to deal with the grief and loss with the loss of her husband, but also to have this sleep-deprived situation for her and her daughter. And the mother explained to the psychologist she had tried many strategies. She had set up a rewards chart where she put stars each morning for every extra hour the little girl had slept. She'd even tried to give her little bits of chocolate for breakfast for the hours that the girl had slept. She tried to reason with her. They were a Christian family, and she said, your father is up in heaven. He's looking down. He will be so proud of you if you can sleep in the night, because then you can go to school in the day and do good work. None of these strategies were working. And the psychologist and some of her colleagues came to the seminar with the intent purpose to try and write a story for this little girl. And you may wonder, where does someone begin to write such a story to help encourage a child to overcome a fear of the sleep? I'm going to share with you the story, and then we're going to look at the process that this group of psychologists went through in creating it, because this story did wonderful help. A little bit of water for my storytelling. There's people still arriving late, so I'm letting them in. Maybe Eric's gone on break. I'm not sure. Here we go. Eric, are you there? Could you keep... That's all right. I've done it. There was once a little coloured house that sat at the edge of the town. And inside the little coloured house was a strong table. And on top of the strong table, there was a music box. And every day, the music box lid would open. And the ballerina that lived inside the music box could dance around and around and around. How this ballerina loved to dance. And at the end of the day, the lid would close and the ballerina could rest. And life went on very beautifully for many years in this little coloured house. Every day, the ballerina could dance, and every night, the ballerina could rest. But one evening, a terrible storm passed across the village and whirled around that little coloured house and shook the house so terribly. One of the legs from the table snapped off, and the table wobbled, and the music box lid opened so wide it couldn't find a way to close again. And the ballerina inside was left dancing round and round and round and round, all through that night, all the next day, all the next night, all the next day, all the next night. But then, passing by the window of the little coloured house, came the spirit of the dreams. The spirit of the dreams looked in through the window and came inside and sang a special song that helped that music box lid find a way to close. And that night the ballerina was able to rest. And then the next morning, the spirit of the dreams came in through the window, sang a different kind of song, and the music box lid could open. And from that day on, the spirit of the dreams always remembered to visit that little coloured house. And the ballerina was able to dance and rest and dance and rest. Now, the psychologist the next day called the mother in because it was important that she check with the mother. What did the mother think about this story? The mother immediately liked the story, and she had an idea to give the story a bit more strength. And so she worked out that the next day, when the little girl was at school, she invited an artist friend to come. And the artist painted the spirit of the dreams, which is actually a character from Bulgarian folklore, the dream spirit. She painted the dream spirit on the bedroom wall, the little girl's bedroom, so that when the little girl came home from school and put her bag down in her room, "Mummy, what is this beautiful painting on my wall?" And the mother said, "When we have had our evening meal, I have a story to tell you, and then you will know." And that evening, the mother read that or told that, I'm not sure, I don't think it matters. She shared that story with the little girl, and the little girl climbed. She was already in bed. She pulled up the bed covers right up, closed her eyes, and fell into a long, deep sleep. And for many, many nights afterwards, the mother used that story every night, and the little girl once again was sleeping, as one would hope a child can do. I heard of all of this via email and via translation, but that is the summary of what happened. So I'm going to share a screen now because it's a very unusual story, as you would have heard. And when I bring up when I run trainings, there's many ways that you can gather metaphors for your story, for your therapeutic story writing. And one of them is to list the different things that the child or the teenager, whoever you are writing for, is interested in. And so you'll see here on this mind map, I'm going to show you a second one in a minute, but you'll see here on this mind map that first of all in the middle, in the circle in the middle, I encourage them to put the age of who you're writing for, 5 years, and then the challenge. In fact, the resolution, what was out of balance and what you're hoping for, which is overcoming a fear of sleep. So that's in the center there. Then they listed that the psychologist already had knew a bit about the little girl, and she knew she was interested in dancing and music and ponies and cats. And they also put day and night up there because that seemed to fit in with a possible journey for the story. So that's all they had at this point. And then they really got stuck. They just couldn't work out a way to do the journey. And I suggested, there was a garden outside where this seminar was, and I suggested that they all head off for a 10-minute walk to just see, because often walking can loosen our thinking. That's a documented thing from poets and philosophers for thousands of years. Walking can loosen our thinking. And by the time they came back, one of them had such a big smile on her face, I could tell that something had happened for her. And if we go to the next slide, you will see on the left-hand side, she had taken the idea of the dancing and the music, and she had thought about a music box. And the music box with the lid that opens and closes, which reflects sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking. In fact, it became such a strong focus for them that they changed what they had in the middle of the circle to aiming for their resolution, a balance between sleeping and waking. And they also then, because they then had something to work with, then other ideas came. They decided to use the storm, the spirit of the dreams as the helping metaphor. And as you would have heard, they didn't use the cats or the ponies. You certainly don't make a list of everything that the child or teenager is interested in and squeeze them all into the same story. They didn't need them. But they did bring in the table because they wanted to honor the mother who was managing in a very difficult situation, and she was managing like a table on 3 legs. And if you can just envisage a table with 3 legs, it would be very wobbly. And so that was their process for coming up with this story. And it was a lot of work, certainly writing the journey. And wait a minute, I need to now stop sharing the screen. But it really did wonderful story medicine for this little girl, and it helped the mother as well. And just quickly, as one more example, sometimes as adults, we can write a therapeutic story for ourselves. This therapeutic story work there's no age, there's definitely no age group. And in a quick summary, a 55-year-old woman just recently put together a story. She did it by using random story cards, which is something we're going to work with. She was so much in her situation, she couldn't think clearly. So she picked 2 cards out of a big group of cards, and she picked Firefly and Moon. Firefly and Moon. And her backstory, her situation that she was living with, she had lost her job, her husband was no longer alive, and she was in a very depressed, sad, lonely state. And a lot of her friends had been saying to her, you really like nature, you really need to get outside, you need to get out and walk more because that's going to help the healing process. But you see, we can often give this kind of advice, but usually we need to discover this for ourselves. And this is how her writing her own story did this. And she made up this little story. It was actually only a few sentences long about the firefly and the moon. And it was about a firefly that lived in a dark cave. And the firefly used to have a bright light. But over the years, the light had grown so dim, it was no longer there at all. And the firefly was left flying round and round this dark cave, not knowing where it was going. But one evening, as it was flying round, coming down through a tiny crack in the roof of the cave was some moonbeams. from the bright shining moon up above. And one of these moonbeams came dancing down through the crack and shone its light on the firefly, and the firefly found its light again. That was the story, but it spoke so deeply to her, she came up to me at the end of the seminar saying, I know what I have to do. My friends have been telling me all this time, but I know I'm going to take this weekend, I'm going to take my tent and I'm going camping in a forest. I know what I have to do now. And it was the story that helped her. So there were so many examples. And sometimes therapeutic stories aren't just written for an individual. Sometimes, as in our extraordinary year last year, stories can be offered for whole world situations. It's a bold move, but last March, when the lockdown started to happen here in my country, Australia, I thought to myself, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a health worker, what can I do? And so I started writing little stories and putting them for free on my website. They're still there, available for free. And the first one I put up was about a little gnome who had to stay home. I wrote it for little children, 3 to 5 years old. I couldn't believe the response. Even an 80-year-old contacted me. This story is for me. It was written to develop or help with a positive attitude about we have to trust Mother Tree and we're going to stay in our tree root home. And there's many things that we can do when we're home on our own in our tree root home. And there was a song and dance with the story. Within 2 weeks, this was in 26 languages. It had whizzed around the world and said to me, there is such a thirst in our world for stories, because how else would that have happened so quickly? And every so often you get a glimmer of just how important, well, our Indigenous cultures have known this for forever, but we get a glimpse of just how important story medicine and the healing power of stories can be. So there's an overview, some different examples, different ages, different ways of writing stories. Certainly just using that mind map, that's not the only way. Sometimes you might just have an intuitive thought. Sometimes you might want to write a story that just reflects or mirrors the situation. Sometimes you might want to write a consequence story. There's many possibilities, way too many for me to cover in a short introduction. But that's what I wanted to offer you. And I would like to give some time now to take a few questions. And then the most important thing as a takeaway for you is that I want you to have a chance for your imaginations to flutter and fly. And so the last half hour of this, that's what we're going to be doing. But meanwhile, if there's any questions, please, I'll just go back to gallery view. And if everyone knows how to use that hand up for Eric, you've got a question.
Yes, my
You've
real
got a
hand.
very big hand, Eric.
Yes,
So it's
yes. Of course, the story can be a model for the future, but I feel that the stories, the healing stories, should not be too literally and simple-mindedly just a model for what the client wants to do. So how to help the client make the story more complex than just a simple, this is what I want to imitate?
Oh, Eric, because it's different for different ages. I can I can answer that with an example and of a very difficult situation with a 19-year-old, and the psychologist just didn't feel that they could offer what you were talking about. They actually co-worked with, the psychologist co-worked with the 19-year-old. The 19-year-old was in prison. he was imprisoned because he had been very drunk at a party and driven 4 friends home and crashed the car, and the 4 friends were killed and he survived. And together they created a story about a captain in an army who'd made a very poor decision to lead his troops into battle. The psychologist came up with the metaphors in the beginning, but then the 19-year-old took over with it. And this sergeant had made a poor decision. All the troops were killed, but he survived. But he was left with a wound here, that was so deep, no doctor in the land could find a way to heal it. And then the young man, it would take too long to take you through the whole process. But there were so many approaches, Eric, and sometimes they do just need a simple approach. You know, there's so many examples. Have we got any other hands up? No. Yes. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Karthik. Is that correct?
Right. Thank you.
Yes?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, you might need to speak up a little bit more.
Okay. Hope it is better now. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay. So when you were saying the stories, I spent volunteering my time um, with adults in autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So I find my interest in it, and I almost spend a lot of time with the neurodiverse minds, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
storytelling towards them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
I've helped people who are working with or children and teens on the I mean, there's different political language here, so I know what you mean with autism. Often visuals are important, especially with the children, puppets and so on. And sometimes the stories may need to be quite matter of fact. I helped a mother develop a whole chapter book because she was taking her 9-year-old autistic boy on a holiday, and she wanted to prepare him for all the change and transition ahead. So it was part in metaphor, but it was mostly in real life about a train journey and the different things that would happen on the way. But it was enough of a story to help carry the interest, but yeah, lots of reality on the way. It's not an area that I have personal experience with, so I'm reluctant to offer much more. And also this work is quite new. I certainly am not standing here thinking I've got all the answers. It is so new that I'm trying to build a network. Please stay in contact with me so we can grow this work. I'm currently cooperating with some people who work in homes with elderly with dementia, and they're using stories for different reasons. And it's all a matter of, it sounds terrible, it's not experimenting, but very sensitively trying things out, but then documenting. Did that make a difference? And what age was it for? And what was it about? And so on. That's going to help grow this work. That's my honest answer. If you've got any experience you want to share with us, please do.
Sure. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just need to go. There's 2 pages here. I need to look. Thank you all for coming to this. I don't know if anyone's in the middle of the night where they are or
Eric,
in real time. Fortunately for me, it's 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning in Australia. No more questions? It doesn't matter because the more time we have for the practical session, the better. I'll just check, was there anything in the chat box? Midnight in Scotland, someone's from Scotland. All right, thank you for sharing that. Hang on a minute. Okay, good. Someone's given an email. So please, in case I lose this chat box afterwards, please email me, susanperrow@gmail.com. That would be wonderful to connect on that, on the topic of autism spectrum order. Okay.
Karen, did you raise your hand?
Oh, I did. I was just going to say I'm part of a group in training to help with dementia patients, and we have been learning a process called time slips, which is everyone embarking on a journey of wonder together and starting with an image and accepting all of the contributions and adding it to the whole. So it's a very exciting process and affirming.
Oh, good. Well, then perhaps we could be in touch as well. This was wonderful. And just to mention for your interest, because this is so new, I have battled for the last 5 years to even get Wikipedia to have a topic called therapeutic storytelling. And after a lot of work and putting in, you know, proper researched articles and all kinds, everything they wanted, they put it up for 3 months and then they merged it into bibliotherapy. And they still have used my references and some of my writing, which is great. And of course, bibliotherapy is the big umbrella, healing through stories. But this is a particular area where we are crafting stories. We're not researching existing stories. Not that I'm undervaluing that. Of course, there's a wealth of folk and fairy tales and existing stories. So, pin. There we go. So can we start the practical part, please? Yes, Eric, is that good to go?
Oh, Ansuk, did you want to say something? You got to turn your mic on. Ansuk, you're...
Thank you so much, Susan. I've read your books long ago, and I really I was amazed, but not as an experienced storyteller. It is so hard to start the first step to practice that kind of crafting stories. So that first step, if I can practice, then I will use more usefully. Yeah.
Good. Well, that's what we're about to do now. So I will take it away. So thank you for your comments.
Okay.
I'm about to launch you into a very easy first step. So what I'm about to do is, and I'll just share my screen for a minute, but I'll takes a while to work. Not this one. Here. I am going to, in a minute, get you to be closing your eyes and, actually, I'll be putting you in some little breakout rooms and you're going to be closing your eyes and just choosing 2 of some of these story words. And it's random because if I was to say to you, have a look and choose 2 and write a story using those 2, you could spend 10 to 15 minutes just making your choice. And so you'll be closing your eyes instead of using your intellect to make a decision. But I'm going off it. Don't worry, I'm coming back. I'm going off it because I've just got a couple of things to show you. Normally in real time, I make up little cards with these words and they're face down. And so in a training, people come out and they have to turn over two. And they may turn over frog, and they may turn over stick. And then there's two motifs for a card. We've bypassed our thinking about it, and we're straight into the imagination. But I want to give you just a very quick summary of creating a little story in a very easy way. Hopefully this is going to work now. Yes. This is going to sound obvious, but every story has a beginning, middle, and an end. Yes? But what makes a story interesting is that somewhere around the beginning, and I know this is very simplistic, of course, in a lot of stories for older children and adults, the beginning might come at the end. But in this simplistic model, what happens somewhere around the beginning is that a problem is introduced. And then in the middle part, the problem is wrestled with and sorted, and by the end, the problem is resolved. That's a very simple introduction. Beginning, middle, and end. And let's look at this. Let's just say that you turned over two cards and you have, shouldn't use that. On one card, you have king. On the other card, you have king on one card, you have teapot on the other. Now, if the story was just simply about a king who had a wonderful collection of teapots, and he would have parties and all the teapots would come out and the tea would be made and everyone would enjoy the tea and go home. That's not very interesting. You introduce a problem, then the interest, the listener is pulled into the story and wants to know, how is that problem going to be resolved? And there could be 1,000 or more, probably 1,000,000 if we had enough time, stories written just with these two main words. It doesn't mean that you can't introduce other characters. You just have to be careful you don't make the story too complex. But first of all, does the king have a problem? Maybe he's sick, or is he greedy, or what could be the problem? Does the teapot have a problem? Maybe the teapot has cracked. That's probably an obvious one. It's cracked, and how's it going to get fixed? Or maybe the teapot is actually the king's crown. And the king doesn't want, the teapot doesn't want to sit on the head of the king anymore. And he has to find a way to have the king have another crown, and then the teapot can go back and be used for tea. Maybe the king is inside the teapot and has to find a way to get out. There's so many possibilities with just these two story words. Maybe the king and the teapot together solve another kind of problem in the land. I think you can see how many possibilities. The idea here is that because you've only got the focus of two words, your imagination can flutter and take wings. So that's a little introduction I wanted to give you. And what I'm asking you to do in this exercise, when I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and there may be 3 or 4 of you in a breakout room, in each room, but still between the 3 or 4 of you, nominate one person to close their eyes, and you're going to point at my PowerPoint slide, and you're just going to pick 2, no more. And then with those 2, you're going to just workshop an idea. You won't have time to write the story. You're just going to workshop the bones of a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. I would suggest you try and identify whether you're writing it for a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old or an adult. That can help you direct the journey. So that's the plan with this exercise. And then when you come back, I'll give you, gee, how much time have we got? Yes, I'll give you about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And then we'll still have a little bit of time to hear from a few of you. Are there any questions before I put you in your rooms? Because I've just given you a lot of instructions then.
Yes, somebody has written in the chat, do we create a problem that needs to be resolved?
Well, yes, that's what I was saying. Most story structures with beginning, middle, and end, if you don't have a problem, the story can be very bland and uninteresting. It's really, that's what builds the tension. That's what makes the journey. You don't, at this point, have to have any therapeutic intention. This is really an exercise just to get your imagination on the move. Because for many of us, just like if you don't exercise your legs, your muscles can atrophy. That can happen with our imaginations. And this is an exercise. Sometimes when I feel I've got writer's block, I go to my collection of story cards and I pull out 2 cards. And it's quite interesting just what it can do. And it may lead nowhere, but you might be surprised. But yes, definitely. Without the problem, I don't think the story would be very interesting.
So it could be a situation that's out of balance.
Yes, but you don't have to have a therapeutic intention at this point. No. We need a lot more time for that. But the problem needs to be resolved. If you were to make up a story about an elephant, and maybe there's a mouse in there as well, and the elephant is always squashing the mouse, and then the story doesn't go any further, that doesn't leave us with, especially for a story for children, that's a real thing. Yes, an elephant might squash a mouse, but you may want to work out a way that that mouse finds a way to survive and maybe even help the elephant. There's many nature tales like that. But let me put you in your breakout rooms. You'll fuddle and so on, but the main thing is your imaginations will have a chance to work. Okay? And I will see you back here in 12 minutes. I'll give you 1 minute notice. I'm presuming everyone knows how to use breakout rooms. If you don't, just look for a little box that you click on to join your assigned breakout room. We've got 37 participants. So, wait a minute, recreate. 11.
Susan, how will we see the story words if we're in the breakout rooms?
Oh!
Should we do that first?
What? Thank you for that, because I'm so used to, when I run my trainings, there's only 12 in a training. And so I actually turn the cards over at random before I put them in. Well, that would have been a bit of a thing, wouldn't it? So let me share the screen, which means every one of you now is going to have to reach forward with your eyes closed and choose 2. And then when you get into your breakout rooms, I don't know how you're going to work that. Maybe the person whose first name is alphabetically first is the one who gets to choose their one. How about that? Is that clear?
Yes.
Close your eyes, choose 2, and then the person with the top of the alphabet. First name gets to be the one. All right. Let me get rid of this. What a wonderful collaboration that was. There's hardly anyone in the rooms, Eric, when I've only got 11 here. Hang on. Okay. Okay.
Okay, good. I was not sent into a room. That's good. Okay. I think it's going very nicely.
There's someone here. That's Kiran Shah. She's not in a room either. Kiran, are you there?
Yes, I've just joined in. Hello.
Oh, I'm a bit late. I'm afraid.
It was great fun. Work with
Thank you
someone
for
else.
sharing. I think we've got time for one more, please. A quick summary of one more group. Would be lovely to hear from all of you, but is there a hand up anywhere?
Yes, Kalyan.
Yes? Okay, go ahead.
So I was with Devina, Cindy, and Shifa, and the two words that we had was turtle and butterfly. So we basically explored the concept that we would have gone through with the story. So I'm just going to fill in the rest of it myself. So there was once a little turtle who was always left alone on the playground because he couldn't run as fast and play and jump and skip like the rest of his friends do. So he would spend all his time in one corner of the playground worrying about why he was so slow and why he had to carry such a heavy weight on his back. So one day, as he was sitting there thinking about his life and why he's not able to join his friends, there comes a butterfly and sits next to him and asks him what's wrong. So he tells her, I'm very slow. I would like to go play with my friends and run and skip. But with the shell on my back, I can't do anything. So the butterfly says, the shell and the back is to protect you. You have a home. I don't have any. I'm very frail. I can get hurt even by a single thorn. But still, the turtle is not convinced. He said, I would still like to go play with my friends. I want to be fast. And then the butterfly tells him the story of her own journey. So she tells him, once I was very slow too and sad. I would think that I would not be able to get anywhere. I was a caterpillar. And then one day I underwent a transformation. I went into a cocoon and I came out a butterfly. Now I can fly as far and as high as I can. And I've seen the world, I've seen the sea, and in the sea there are turtles, and the turtles swim very fast. So all you need to do is find yourself some water, and then you see how fast you are compared to your friends. And that's when the turtle realizes that on land, he may not be fast, but once he gets into water, he is going to be one of the fastest swimmers.
So it's a real how story. I think there's a whole genre of, or why. That's right. I think Rudyard Kipling used to call them the just so stories. Why? Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. It would be lovely to hear more, but our time is coming to an end. And I would just like to say with that storyboard, I'm happy if you take a screenshot of it. Would you like me to bring it up again?
Yes, and actually, Susan, there is more time if you would like to hear a couple more examples of what people...
I thought we have to finish for another session to start.
We did, but we can go over. There is extra time if you want.
Okay, well, let's just hear one more, because I'm afraid I didn't know that and I've got another appointment.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, but let's hear one more. Is there someone bursting to share?
No.
No.
Sonia.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
raising my hand,
Yes, Sonia.
Susan
Yes,
and
please.
Eric.
Yes.
Good morning here from India. So I'm in New Delhi, and we in our group we had a couple of Indian friends. We had Nikki, we had Amit, we had Ranjita, and Ansuk. And Anne chose two beautiful words, feather and prince. So we together decided, and thanks to Nikki for this beautiful idea, that let's just get to the old fairyland where the king had this beautiful feather which was gifted to him from some god fairy, and that would not allow the women in his kingdom to age fast. And so he very safely kept it for his
It would not
daughters
allow the women to
to
eat
age
first.
fast. Yeah, age
Oh,
fast. Yeah.
okay.
So he
I'm glad we've made time for this story.
so he kept it for his daughter, but as luck would have it, the stepmom stole it from his, the feather from the king, and kept it for her. And as the daughter was growing up, she grew up. She grew up like a prince. She would learn horse riding, and she would learn archery and everything. And that's how the king named the princess as Prince, because she was just like a prince and not like a princess. She would not like to dress up. So this was a twist in the tale that, her name was Prince. And when she was growing up, the stepmom, like, all other fairy tales, threw her out of the kingdom because she was getting worried that the daughter would take that feather. But here, another twist is that the princess, instead of waiting, because her name was Prince and she herself felt like she was capable enough to do everything. So instead of really searching for anyone else to help her, she then went on to create her own army of people, her own troop of strong people around her, and went back to the kingdom, fought with the stepmom, defeated her, and got her not just the feather back, but also the kingdom back. And that's how, as a group, we thought that, this was a twisted fairy tale.
Yes, but very empowering story.
Yeah, thank you so much. All thanks to the beautiful ideas by Ranjita, Nikki, Anne, and Amit. So it was a pretty collaborative effort. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we had that extra time. I'll just share this screen again. As I said, I'm very happy if you want to take a screenshot. I'll bring it up full size. You could have thousands of words. And also for your own country, your own culture, there's things you may want to add. When I first visited China, they were horrified I didn't have bamboo on there. And so bamboo got added, and different things have been added because of different places I've visited. I'd suggest you don't have too many because it's then becoming too confusing. But I wish you well with this. Can I turn it off now? Everyone's had a chance to take a screenshot. I would just like to leave you with the words of Leonard Cohen, who sadly is no longer with us, one of my favorite singers and a real king of metaphor was Leonard. And he had a wonderful song with a chorus that I think is the story writer's mantra. And the chorus goes like this: ring out the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And that has encouraged me greatly with my story work, because there's been many moments where I think I can't write this, or this story's no good, or what. And we'll never write perfect stories. But if the stories that we do write can in any way help shift, even just entertain, for people to enjoy, it's worth having a go at it. And just remember that in the cracks, the light can get in. So thank you to Eric for this wonderful organizing. and I'm looking forward to enjoying other parts of the festival. So susanperrow@gmail.com if you want to contact me. My website, well, it's my name, and look up my work. And as I say, plenty of free stories on there to share, and let's interact.